also back to what you're saying with the like not knowing anything. Like for me, sometimes like I feel like, yeah, I know that I'm not, I don't know like a lot of like maybe back the size to some people go back and lunch, not whatever. And like I might just know mostly like their thing baller and I do everything about thinking balling. So from interaction to that's like my key tool. And I also heard like they're like UX designers telling me when they don't know certain programs, like one person told them like even dummy know how to use something like a tool that they wasn't familiar with as an interaction designer.
Yeah, that's just unacceptable, right? Like, I think that there are a lot of people who can get away with saying a lot and don't get checked on it. And like, no one should ever devalue you at work, right? There's certain levels and there's certain bars that people should never cross, right? And I think you and I talked about it briefly. Like, if someone says something that is like uncomfortable to you or that feels like this was not appropriate to say at work, like ask them to repeat themselves, right? Because most of the time they won't. They'll check themselves and be like, I didn't mean it like that, or try to paraphrase and fix themselves. Or if they truly said it, document it. Write that down, write the time of day it was, the date that it happened, and document these areas where you're being mistreated at work because it's not appropriate. And hopefully your company has like an HR system set up for you to be able to report these things. But documentation is key, right? You don't ever want it to be like a he said, she said situation. And so if you can have clear dates as to when these behaviors were happening, that's just the best way to protect yourself.
Yeah, like documentation is important. So I have another question. Speaking of language,
I think when it comes to like how you speak at work, like I think we also have to give background and context of where we come from, right? So it's like for me, I went to a lot of the suburban schools and I've learned how to be able to articulate myself and speak up in speeches. I think where I struggled was I didn't have confidence at work, right? And so I worked at my again first job, right? Like where I would use slang and they would attack me on the slang that I would say. And I'm not even someone who talks in a lot of slang, who says a lot of stuff, but I'm like, it would be like, I don't even remember the word that I used, but I remember it was brought up so many times in meetings as like a call out. And I noticed that when people call you out for how you speak, then that's a lot of other issues in the company more than how you speak, right? Like, I think it's important to learn how to articulate. Like, I think I've always spoken well, but through working in corporate companies, I've learned how to project and how to really speak clearly and show up. But that's a lot more to do with confidence and how you show up in workspaces. Speaking in like the vernacular of how companies talk, like the jargon of the tech companies that I work at is crazy, right? And I will never know all of it. I'll never know how to speak to all those things. Um, but I would say I'm also someone who's really transparent because I'm in a safe space. Like, let's start there. I found a company that felt like a safe space for me to show up. But I'm also really transparent if I'm like, I don't know how to articulate what I'm trying to say, so bear with me. Like, I'll shout that out before I say anything that I feel sounds done or that I'm not explaining myself well. Sometimes I'll say something and I'll be like, maybe I didn't say that in the best way. Like, let's work on it together. And sometimes I'll literally just pair with someone else to kind of work through what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's that we should know how to say everything in the perfect kind of way. I do think that learning how to talk in corporate spaces takes practice. I feel like I've become a way better speaker over the past couple of years just because I put myself in positions like this to learn how to talk and communicate.
yeah. Because to be honest, like it needs to be like talking a certain type of way. Like, you know, like I said, like when it comes to the music, anybody knows rap music, you know, now we're Main Street. Some of my counterparts are like people just be like saying some rap songs. Say, okay, I'm like, wait, you guys know these songs, right? And you guys know some of these slang. And it's like sometimes like it seems like if I was to say something or someone like, you know, like was to say something from a rap song, not like from a rap song, but like a slang that is common meanings, it'll be like, oh my God, like, what did you just say?
Like even down to y'all, right? Like y'all would be something that I would say at my first company that would always get taken into like a country context. I don't know why, but they would like make it into something that is not what I'm saying. Y'all in the dictionary, like we know this is a word, but it's like it's common, right? And that is my level of code switching that I still do today. Like I will remove certain slang out of how I speak at work because I simply don't want to have to explain myself, right? And it's like when I'm using slang, I want it to be something that's relatable to who I'm talking to, right? So it's like I'm not gonna use a lot of slang at work. I've learned how to shut that off. Even this right now feels like slightly professional setting. So like I'm gonna cut certain words out of just how I speak.
I think they should be authentically you because like I said, like being like I feel like our culture is mainstream. Like they need black actors. You know what I mean? The fact that it's like, I mean, I'm not saying in tech the whole problem with tech is that it's right now the statistic it has gone up a lot. It's like 3% now. It used to be 2%. In general, it went up to like what 8%. I saw earlier. So I feel like obviously they need us because of diversity, but then we have to accept us for who we are. And it's like, sometimes you do get hired at corporate company, only black person, and that's happening a lot.
Yeah, like, tech changes year to year, right? Yeah, so it's like even the people who've been in tech for years are not caught up with the current things that are happening right now. And so I do think it's important to figure out how you show up to work that feels like you're bringing your full self. Like that was a conversation that when I got my first UX job, I remember the first step I took to take that step to bring my full self to work. And I told her in my first meeting with her, I said, like, I really want to learn how to bring my full self to work. And these are the examples of when I feel like I'm not. And I'm like, when I feel like I'm getting quiet, when I'm getting closed off to myself, there's something wrong. And I need you to be aware of that so we can work on it together. And like, I'm learning how to show up at work. And like, for me, work and being black were two separate things for a long time. Like, it really was. Like, I did not talk about my personal life. I did not talk about the things I was interested in. Like, it was very much, I'm here to work. And that started in college. Like, when I went to classes, this is me showing up in classes, the very surface level version of me. And then I would leave the door and go live my true life. Like, I would go be my full whole self.
And then that's the thing, like, some corporate jobs, they're like, yay, we want you guys to be yourself.
And that's all the jobs that I've worked in. Yeah, I've always wanted to work at a job that has a good culture. And that's been, even in my first job, as toxic as it was, that was the same type of way they wanted you to be, is show up at work, right? But I didn't know how to show up just enough. Like, because that's how it feels being a black person. Like, you have to show up just enough. Like, you can't do too much, but you can show up just enough that's palatable, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always felt that way when it came to my
like, well, like just in general as a POC, but I think also like we talked before, men is different for black men and black women. I feel like, black men is really easier. I mean, I don't know what's the struggle. Maybe I need to talk to more black men about what they're dealing with. But I feel like it's easier for them to communicate if they're under distress or they're not opinion something and they can address it and understand. Because I feel like sometimes if it's Bob, let's say he says something and he goes crazy, like, oh my God, he's just so passionate. Like that's what my mentor told me. Or like he's so passionate about his work, that's why. And like, oh yeah, it's like somebody else, like a female white woman, to like be stressed or whatever. Like, oh yeah, she's coming from like a place of like she really wants this so bad or something like that. And it is like me, I'll be like the damsel in the stress, like, oh my God, like what was that about? Like that's crazy, like yeah. So like I had talked to like a mentor about it, like she gave me some great advices, like especially like with imposter syndrome. She doesn't believe in imposter syndrome, and she doesn't believe in microaggressions because she like literally that's aggression, like that's them throwing a tree at you. Yeah, like there's nothing micro by there, dope. Right.
I felt that.
Yeah, so like when she said that to me, I was like, you're right. I don't even know why it's called microaggression.
Compared to like, I guess, before civil rights happened, it's the aggression, which shouldn't be our priority. Or like it ends aggression when you feel like you're not comfortable in your workspace or you feel like you can't show up as your full self, and that's 100% true. And I think it's like just learning how to show up in your workspaces is a growing process, right? And like, what does that look like to you? I think that bring your whole self to work, I do think has measures to it, right? Like we show up in on different spaces in different ways all the time, and that's perfectly fine. Like my energy going to a party is not my energy going home and being with family or being with friends, right? Yeah. My energy showing up at work doesn't need to be like all parts of who I am. Yeah. But it should be the parts that let you show up and get your job done well. Yeah. And for me as a creative, if I feel like I can't express myself, then I feel like I can't do my work well. I struggle and I'm sensitive in all those spaces if I feel like I'm not in a space where I can speak up for myself or share my experiences with others. And so, like, one of the first bars that I broke down was like, I've always been passionate about outreach and reaching out to Black and tech communities. And so I started telling my job about that, which felt like at a time like taboo. Like when I first started doing it, I'm like, I can't bring up the work that I do outside of work. And I started to show up and bring that information to my managers, and they started supporting me and helping me with that. And just even lowering that bar allowed me to feel more comfortable. And then I started talking about trips I went on. I started actively like sending my manager, you know, the PG versions of pictures of trips that I've been on and just sharing that part of who I am. I realized that I didn't even used to talk to my managers about like my family or siblings or that. And I realized like just observing my white counterparts, I'm like, this is what y'all do. A bar that I still will never cross is letting my colleagues follow me on Instagram. Like, y'all don't need to be that close to me. But I realized like that's something that my white peers do, and it creates a different level of connection and bond with the people that you work with. Mm-hmm. And so I just learned what feels comfortable to me. Like letting my peers in that close. I did it at one point and I just didn't like it. I didn't like my personal stuff being brought up at work. Like, you have to figure out what bars feel right to you and what boundaries you need.
Me, to be honest, like, I mean, not even being like in corporate America. Like, I felt like in the beginning, I always had done like this is where I make my money. This don't mix me up with the drama because I felt like in the beginning, like just having those boundaries so that someone doesn't throw it in your face in the future. Like that's just how I felt. Now that I see like my white counterparts do that, it's still conflicting to me because in a way I really want to like, and I trust them to have these informations and they might not judge me. Like I'm not gonna judge them. So it's kind of hard. I don't even know if it has anything to do with race, but it's like it's really hard. Or maybe it does because it's like that's how they do it. You don't know.
I think it's trust, right? Yeah, like so, and I think it's like peeling back an onion. I don't think the struggle with Black people is setting boundaries. I think we set too many boundaries. Like we create so many walls of separation that it doesn't allow people to feel like they really know you. And I think that there are ways of unpeeling just enough that you feel like you're making meaningful connection, where if you left the company, they have more to say than just like, she was a great worker. She did really good work. She was really efficient. She was X, Y, and Z. And there was a point in time where that's all I wanted people to know about me. Mm-hmm. But by allowing people to see just a little bit more about you, they can see like, oh, she's resilient. She's overcome obstacles inside of work and outside of work that allow her to show up here. But if I'm showing them to work and I'm really going through some stuff, I'm not going to just pretend that everything is 100% okay with me. I'm going to let the manager know, like, there's a lot of stuff going on with my family right now, but I wanted to make sure I was on this call to talk about X, Y, and Z. And not showing them that you are resilient. Like, you've gone through things and you're experiencing life and you're still able to show up. I remember when everything with George Floyd was happening and all of this police brutality was happening outside of work. Like, and a lot of companies, right, were acknowledging it on social media and speaking out to show that they are woke and aware. But I brought it up on meetings because I was tired of like pretending like this was not something I was experiencing outside of work. And it was actually, I think, because of COVID and everything, taking a physical and mental toll on me. And I brought it up on a call with a manager, like, hey, like, we don't need to talk about it on this call, but I need you to know, like, I'm bleeding down by this. This is impacting me. And I wanted people to know, like, there's more in my life going on than, like, movie pixels and creating designs, you know?
So I have one more question. Like, so how did you know, like, enough was enough?
Like, it was time to leave the company?
Yeah.
My mental health was in disarray, right? So when we talked about it, I think we talked about it briefly before, like when you're getting to that point where you feel like you're always complaining, like there's always something wrong, there's always something to vent about. And we talked about like allies, right? Or knowing who to speak to. I got to the point where I was speaking to so many people and complaining so much that I literally started recording videos of myself on the way to work and just using that almost like as a video diary, just to vent and like let all these feelings out. And that was getting to the point where that wasn't even enough, right? Like I would feel so much angst and anxiety about going to work that I just closed in on myself. I remember like I had gone through that phase of like working so hard and still not getting recognition. Still, if I made a little mistake, it being told like this was, I at one point there were typos in one of the documents I had sent, and I realized I had sent an outdated file. And he told me, this is the reason why you will never get promoted or you'll never get the raises you're looking for. And I remember that was like my breaking point in my head. I was like, this is not safe. Like, I should not be here. And I went through a phase of like believing at some point the devaluing information that he was telling me. And I would just close off to myself. I was like, well, if me reaching out, trying to make connections isn't enough or isn't working, then I'm just going to work in the corner by myself with my laptop and not talk to anybody. And still that was being given like, now I'm not being talkative enough. Now I'm not reaching out to people enough. And so it really went through phases where feeling like I was not good enough. And that's when I realized like enough was enough, right? Like if I'm getting to the place where I feel like I'm not good enough in any capacity to do the work that I needed to do, I needed to get out of that environment and out of that space.
Yeah, like that makes sense because, like, to be honest, like when you start closing yourself out and you're not like, like we said, you tried everything and enough, like everything is not like working out. Like, you know how you try to send like, you try to like, out with a damsel in distress and see how your manager would like, react, that she would even like care to help you out, like try all kind of situations just to test out, like, if it's in your head or not, and then, you realize, okay, it's really not in my head because I tried when, things to see if it's actually what I'm dealing with, if I'm actually getting mistreated and whatnot. And it makes sense that you kind of went through that. And you did all those things before you was just like, what? Which you don't need to actually go through. It should be someone there for you to be like, hey, you shouldn't go through this. It's unfair for you to deal with that, especially the fact that that's why you're not getting a promotion because I had a little small typo.
Yeah, there was no one to tell me like this is actually wrong. And you have your colleague, like you have your family and your peers saying like you deserve better, like you need to get out. But it's like really being in a toxic relationship, right? Like no one sees it all, so you make excuses for them and you tell them like, well, maybe you did wrong in this space, or maybe you should have done something different. And you get to a point where you're like,
wow, I'm feeling sorry for the person that is like putting me through the stress, but I'm not feeling sorry for myself.
right? And you don't look at yourself as a victim.
And it's kind of like, I hate the word victim because I know I'm not a victim,
But you can empower yourself to get beyond that point, but you do need to realize when you're being mistreated. And like you can't I agree. You should not stay in this victim mentality or just being someone who lets things happen to you. But you do need to understand when things are actually happening to you. And sometimes we, I think, put ourselves in this place of disillusionment so much that we allow ourselves to think like, oh, this isn't actually that bad. Or I'm the cause of this, right? And it's very much of an unhealthy, abusive relationship, right? And so it took me leaving my company and being in a healthy work environment and telling them what I was going through and people being like, that's crazy. Like, you should not have been experiencing those things, for me to truly admit, like, this was unhealthy or like this wasn't good for me. And I definitely don't agree with keeping yourself in a victim mentality, but you should be able to acknowledge when things are not happening in a way that they should.
And then I think other problem with Black women is, what I mean? I know like everybody's at their soft like era and shit, but like, in the days or like when you started or when you was working, it's always like, I'm a strong woman. It's always like being strong. you know what? And he's not gonna bring my spirit. I'm gonna be strong. I'm gonna held up to this until like we're starting to understand like the fact that we keep saying that we're strong. People actually like our other people outside our race really think that we supposed to be handling everything and be meant to expectation. Yeah, like an expectation for us to be strong.
Yeah.
And it's not like because they wouldn't treat somebody else like that. Is there any last thing you want to say?
Yeah, I think it can be disheartening at times when we walk into tech spaces and we don't see a lot of people that look like us. But I think it's important to recognize that there are a lot of people of color in the tech space. And when I was entering in, I was misinformed and I did not have any of the resources that are at our disposal today. I think COVID brought a lot of awareness to so many things and avenues we have, whether it's boot camps, whether it's getting involved with nonprofit organizations, tapping into mentorship groups. There's so many resources at our disposal. And I think one of the biggest threads that have brought me to where I am today and where I'm trying to get to is just the mentors that I have. And so I became a mentor because I wish I had someone who looked like me, who I could look up to. But I think it's really important for you to tap into the mentors you have in your tech community. And if you reach a place where you feel like you have some wisdom or advice to share to others, it's important that you empower yourself to become a mentor yourself. As much as we might have complained or talked about the issues and things that we face, I'm at a really healthy work culture now. And I'm at a space that feels like a space where I feel seen and feel whole. And so there is a space out there for you. I don't want people to feel discouraged, to feel like they don't belong here, because we do. I think most of the time when people treat us like in a way that feels less than, it's because they're afraid of what we bring to the table. And so just know that you can show up and you can be the person that you want to be at work. But it starts within yourself. It starts with having confidence in who you are and what you bring to the table. And so as a mentor, I'm always here just to empower people to feel like they're good enough, that they can show up to their workspaces. And so I want people to feel positive, to feel like you have some tools, and not to feel like this is not a space for you, because it is.
Hey guys, oh my gosh, so you guys have finished part 1 and part 2. Thank you so much. But if you haven't watched part 1, here's a link to part 1 and here's a link to other videos that I have. And thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.